Good morning and welcome back to Eyewitness News here on the KSCW. Our legal counsel, Charlie O'Hara, joining us today. Give us a call, 436-1212, if you have a question for him. Good to see you again, Charlie, and thanks for being here.
Sure.
We do have several calls on the line for Charlie already this morning, so we'll go ahead and get right to the phones. Good morning. Caller, what's your question?
Yes, okay. I've lived in my apartment 4 months this month, and my landlord, I've been asking for the lease since I moved in. He said he was going to mail it to me, and he never did. And now, like this month, he told me I owe him like 3 months late fees. And I was just wondering, is that legal? And he hasn't gave me a lease for him to charge me some late fees.
Well, actually, I believe that lease can actually be an oral agreement. So if you haven't signed anything and you've agreed, whatever the oral agreement that you have with the landlord would control. Now, what you agreed, if you discuss late fees, it would be what you guys agreed to. If you didn't discuss late fees, then that's a whole different matter. I'm not sure that you owe them. There's some statutes that control that specifically when it's not written down, and what happens when you don't have a formal lease written down. You have to look at those. It's always better to have a lease if you can. But if you don't and you haven't agreed to the late fees, you probably don't owe the late fees. It'd be better if you get a hold of your landlord, though, and get a lease, I think.
I was going to say you always maybe should have some paperwork before going into an agreement like that.
I would think so, but sometimes people do it orally and it works out fine, as long as everybody treats everybody right, which doesn't always happen.
Exactly. Case in point. All right. Thank you for your question. All right. We do have another caller on the line. Go ahead. Caller, what's your question for Charlie today?
Yes, I've got a workers' comp question. If you have, let's say, a back injury, and let's say the settlement would be around like $80,000 or so for your injury, do they take away all the different doctor's appointments, surgeries, machinery stuff that they have to give you medical things for, like an implant? Does all that come out of that amount of money?
Well, I would think not, but I'd have to actually, the problem with that question is I don't know what the settlement is, and I don't know exactly what was agreed to when all that happened, and I'd have to see that. I mean, some of those injuries are scheduled. I don't know what kind of how your injury was treated, so it's a little hard to answer that. My guess from what you say, it would be solely a guess without reading the paperwork, would be that those would be in addition to the money that you got, but I'm not sure. I'd have to see the agreement. You probably need to look at the agreement and read it and see what it says.
Okay, thank you, Charlie. All right, we're going to head back to the phones. Another viewer on the line. Go ahead, caller. What's your question?
Yes, I was calling because I have a landlord that just now fixing the electric, and within the electric, my refrigerator blew out, my stove blew out, 3 TVs blown out, and now a refrigerator's blown out, and 2 microwaves.
Well, that sounds like a serious problem. I don't know what's going on with the electrical system, but obviously if the landlord was supposed to fix something and did not fix it and it caused damage, he should replace the things that were damaged. Again, when we talk about landlord and an agreement with somebody renting from them, you have to look at the agreement itself and see what it says. But I would think if the landlord was supposed to do something that's causing damages to your TVs, blowing up your TVs and your refrigerators and things like that, and the landlord hasn't fixed it after you've notified him, he has some responsibility, would be what I would think. But I would refer you back to the lease again as the earlier caller. That agreement really kind of controls what people do, and you need to read that agreement closely and see if it does.
I was going to say, a lot of times they're thick. There's a lot of wording there, so you got to be careful what you're signing.
Well, yeah, and it's very difficult to read all those things, even for an attorney. It takes a lot of time.
They're tiny print.
And so sometimes you have to get out glasses to read it all. But I would recommend, especially in the situation that man is, that he read it and see what it says.
Okay, thank you, Charlie. Good to see you again. Have a good week.
You too.